All right, so welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a listener submission, and this one really grabbed my attention.
Oh, yeah.
It's an interview with Whitney Webb. She's an investigative journalist,
Okay.
and she goes deep into some pretty heavy stuff
Yeah.
about government agencies and hidden agendas. Honestly, it's the kind of stuff that makes you wonder.
Makes you go, wait, what?
Exactly.
Okay.
And you know what I find fascinating about Webb's work
What's that?
is that she can connect all these seemingly random events, like there are these patterns
Yeah.
that point to a much bigger picture.
Hmm.
She's not afraid to challenge the official story.
Right. And that's what makes her work so compelling.
It
So it's like she's pulling back the curtain and showing us what's really going on behind the scene.
Yeah. And we're talking about some major topics here, like the origins of Al-Qaeda, MK Ultra,
Oh, wow.
even the Great Reset.
Those are some really big, complex issues.
They are. But we're going to break it down carefully today. Are you ready to dive in?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with Webb's take on Al-Qaeda. She suggests that it wasn't just some group of extremists that popped up out of nowhere. She thinks intelligence agencies, especially the U.S. CIA, might have actually had a hand in creating it.
Oh, wow. So she's saying they basically helped create their own enemy.
That's what she's implying. And get this, she even uses the term triumvirate of intelligence fuckery to describe it.
Triumvirate of intelligence, what?
Yeah, fuckery, to describe the supposed involvement of the U.S., Israel, and the U.K. What do you make of that?
Well, that's a pretty elated term, but it does highlight how serious Webb's claim is. She's essentially saying that these intelligence agencies may have been involved in a planned operation to create or at least support a group that later became a major threat. To understand what's going on here, we need to look at the historical context.
Right, because this isn't exactly new territory for intelligence agencies.
Not at all. During the Cold War, there were so many instances where the U.S. backed groups that later turned against them.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Take the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, for instance. The U.S. backed them initially to fight the Soviets, but then some factions within the Mujahideen, they actually evolved into groups like Al-Qaeda.
Wow, so it's like a repeating pattern.
Yeah, kind of.
It's a pretty bold claim to compare those Cold War operations to the potential creation of Al-Qaeda.
It is bold, yeah. And it
Huh.
leads to some really important questions.
Like what?
Well, like, if it's true, what were their reasons for doing this? What were they hoping to achieve by basically creating their own enemy?
Yeah, it seems completely backwards. Why would you arm and train a group you're supposed to be fighting against?
That's a good question. And Webb doesn't really give us specific motives in this particular interview, but it's definitely worth thinking about. Did they just underestimate the potential consequences? Or did they actually believe they could control what the group would do? Those are just a couple of possibilities to consider.
Very interesting.
It really is.
And this actually brings us to Webb's next point, which is all about the current narrative of domestic terrorism here in the U.S. She's worried that just speaking out against government policies or expressing doubt about capitalism could put you on some kind of watch list.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
Well, it's definitely something to think about, right? I mean, this is where Webb draws a connection to Operation Gladio, which was a Cold War operation where the CIA might have actually staged terrorist attacks in Europe.
Hold on. Are you serious? The CIA might have been behind actual terrorist attacks
Yeah.
just to influence European politics.
Yeah, that's the claim. And actually, it was investigated and confirmed by the Italian government back in the 1990s. The whole idea was to create this atmosphere of fear, make communism seem like a real and present danger, and basically push European populations towards more conservative, pro-US views.
Wow, that's a scary thought. And Webb seems to be implying that something similar could be happening today, just aimed at a different target.
Exactly. Her argument is that if you broaden the definition of domestic terrorism too much, like if it includes anyone who disagrees with the mainstream narrative, then it creates this climate of fear and self-censorship. And when people are afraid to speak out, it becomes much easier to control them.
I see. Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
It really is.
Well, this leads us to another fascinating but also pretty disturbing topic, MK Ultra. The CIA's infamous mind control program.
Ah, yes, MK Ultra.
From what I understand, it was a series of experiments they ran from the 1950s to the 1970s, looking at all sorts of ways to manipulate people psychologically.
Right, they use drugs, hypnosis, even torture.
And Webb believes that those kinds of operations never really stopped. They just evolved.
Yeah, she thinks they just got more sophisticated, more hidden.
Exactly. And she suggests that they might even be using modern technology for similar purposes.
Yeah.
She points out how blurry the lines have become between the CIA and Silicon Valley.
It's true, there's some deep connections between tech companies and intelligence agencies these days.
It all feels like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
It does. But, the implications are very real.
Absolutely.
She even mentions brain-computer interfaces.
Oh, wow. What are those?
They're these technologies that allow direct communication between the human brain and a computer.
So you could control a computer with your mind.
Exactly.
That's incredible,
Huh.
but also a little scary.
Yeah, you got to think about both sides. Imagine the possibilities, right? But also, what if someone misused that power? If technology allows you to manipulate someone's brain directly, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, that's a really chilling thought.
It is, and it makes you wonder, how much control do we really have over our own thoughts and actions?
That's a good question. So how does this all connect to Webb's concerns about surveillance and what she calls pre-crime?
Right, so Webb's basically worried about a future where technology and AI are used to predict and stop crimes before they even happen.
So, like, you could get flagged as a potential criminal before you've even done anything wrong. Okay, now I'm definitely getting those Black Mirror vibes.
Right. It sounds far-fetched, but
Uh,
we can't ignore the fact that technology is advancing incredibly fast. We have to have these conversations now to make sure we're using these powerful tools responsibly.
I agree. We can't just assume everything will be fine.
No, we need to be proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. So speaking of shaping the future, Webb brings up the concept of the Great Reset.
Yeah, that's something we've been hearing a lot about lately.
It's this supposed plan to, like, reshape the world, maybe trade freedoms for security, that kind of thing.
It's a really complex concept.
It is.
And there are a lot of different interpretations of it. Some people think it's a necessary step towards a more sustainable and equitable world,
Yeah, I've heard that.
while others see it as a sinister plot by a global elite to grab power and control.
That's what Webb seems to be suggesting.
It's important to understand all the different perspectives and motives behind this idea before you form an opinion.
Yeah, it's not as simple as it sounds.
Definitely not.
Webb seems especially worried about the move towards a cashless society and digital currencies. She thinks it's all part of a bigger plan to control people and limit their freedoms.
Yeah, I can see why she'd be concerned about that. I mean, it's true that digital currencies could give governments an unprecedented level of control over financial transactions.
Well, way.
Well, think about it. They could potentially track every purchase you make, freeze your assets, even program money to expire after a certain date.
That's crazy. It sounds like something out of a dystopian novel.
Right, so yeah, it raises some serious questions about privacy and autonomy.
It does. So is Webb saying that the Great Reset is a definite threat, or is it more of a potential danger that we need to be aware of?
Well, I think it's important to differentiate between legitimate concerns and just plain fear-mongering. There are definitely valid reasons to be cautious about the potential for increased control and surveillance, especially as digital technologies become more powerful. But we shouldn't jump to conclusions or assume the worst. It's about staying informed, thinking critically, and being proactive in shaping the future we want.
Right, so it's not about panicking, it's about being informed and prepared.
Exactly.
And speaking of things that might make us panic, Webb also touches on the recent revelations from a CIA whistleblower who claims the agency is gaslighting former employees who are suffering from Havana Syndrome.
Oh yeah, Havana Syndrome. What a strange and mysterious illness.
It is. From what I read, it's affected U.S. diplomats and intelligence officials in a bunch of different countries.
Yeah, the symptoms are pretty varied too. Headaches, dizziness, cognitive problems, hearing loss.
And they still don't know what causes it, right?
Right. Some people think it could be some kind of directed energy attack, but no one knows for sure.
And this whistleblower is claiming that the CIA is basically downplaying the severity of it, maybe even trying to discredit the people who've been affected.
That's what they're alleging, yeah. And this actually ties back into Webb's larger point about the CIA's lack of accountability and its history of cover-ups. If it's true, it suggests that they might be willing to sacrifice the well-being of their own people to protect their secrets.
That's disturbing.
It is. And it makes you wonder, if a powerful institution like the CIA is willing to treat its own employees that way, how might they treat the general public?
Yeah, it's a chilling thought.
It is. It really is.
This is all pretty heavy stuff. We've covered a lot of ground already. We've talked about the origins of Al-Qaeda, the potential for mind control, and a dystopian future of digital surveillance.
And we're just getting started.
Exactly. But before we dive deeper, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far and what it all means.
All right, sounds good.
What stands out to you? What's setting off your alarm bells?
Well, for me, it's the convergence of technology, surveillance, and this potential erosion of privacy and freedom.
Okay.
It's not just about what the government is doing, it's also about how private corporations are involved in this whole data-driven world.
That's a really important point, and we'll definitely be unpacking that further in the next part of our deep dive. We'll also delve deeper into the Great Reset, exploring both the potential benefits and risks associated with this proposed global transformation.
Looking forward to it.
And we'll examine how these issues relate to the potential for manipulation and control in a world where technology is becoming more and more intertwined with our lives.
Right.
So make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned, because things are about to get even more interesting.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of government secrets and hidden agendas with Whitney Webb.
Yeah, last time we left off talking about the Great Reset and how some people see it as this master plan by some powerful elite
Right.
to, reshape the world.
It's definitely a topic that gets people talking.
It does, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism, right?
Absolutely.
One of the key things that Webb focuses on with the Great Reset is this push towards a cashless society and the rise of digital currencies.
Yeah,
And she seems pretty wary of this whole trend.
she does.
She argues that it could give governments an unprecedented level of control over people's finances.
That's definitely a valid concern. With digital currencies, every transaction you make can be tracked and monitored.
Right.
Governments could potentially freeze your assets, put limits on your spending, even program the money to expire after a certain time.
Wow.
This level of control, it raises some serious questions about individual autonomy and the potential for abuse.
Yeah, it sounds pretty dystopian when you put it like that.
It does, but...
But aren't there also potential benefits to digital currencies?
Oh, absolutely.
I've heard arguments that they could make transactions smoother, reduce fraud, make financial services more accessible to people who are currently excluded from the traditional banking system.
Right. Digital currencies could potentially revolutionize the financial system in a lot of positive ways.
Okay.
They could make cross-border transactions easier and cheaper, reduce our reliance on cash, maybe even help fight corruption.
So it's not a clear-cut good or bad thing.
No, it's not a black and white issue.
There are potential benefits and risks to think about.
Exactly. The key is to be aware of both sides of the coin. We need to have these conversations now before these technologies are so widespread that we lose the ability to influence how they're implemented.
I see, yeah.
It's about being proactive, not reactive.
Right. We need to be thinking critically about the implications of these technologies and pushing for policies that protect individual freedom.
And prevent abuse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Webb also connects the Great Reset to the rise of artificial intelligence and this increasing automation of our lives. She seems concerned that we're just kind of sleepwalking into a future where machines make all the decisions.
Right.
And humans are basically rendered obsolete.
Yeah, that fear of, what do they call it, technological unemployment.
Right.
That's a valid concern. As AI gets more sophisticated, it's likely to displace workers in a lot of different industries.
That's already happening.
It is. We're already seeing it in sectors like manufacturing and transportation.
But couldn't this also create new opportunities?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe AI could free us from all these mundane tasks and allow us to focus on more creative and fulfilling things?
That's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
Some experts believe that AI will actually create more jobs than it eliminates
Oh, interesting.
as new industries and opportunities emerge. But we have to acknowledge that this transition won't be easy for everyone.
Right. There will be bumps along the way.
There will be. And we need to prepare people for the jobs of the future, not the jobs of the past.
So what does that look like? How do we prepare for these future jobs?
Well, it means investing in education and training programs that focus on skills like critical thinking, problem solving, creativity.
Those are all really important skills.
They are. We need to equip people with the tools they need to thrive in a world that's constantly changing.
Okay, so we need to be adaptable, we need to be creative, we need to be critical thinkers.
Exactly.
What about this idea that AI could become so intelligent that it surpasses human capabilities?
Right.
And essentially takes over the world?
That's a classic science fiction trope.
It is, yeah.
But is it a real threat? That's a question that a lot of experts are debating right now.
Yeah.
Some people think that artificial general intelligence, AI that can do anything a human can do intellectually, is still a long way off.
Okay.
While others are warning that it could happen sooner than we think.
So it sounds like we need to be cautious, but not necessarily panic just yet.
Right. Be aware of the potential risks, but also recognize the potential benefits. AI is a tool.
Yeah.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. The choice is ultimately ours.
Well, speaking of choices, Webb doesn't really offer many solutions in this interview, does she?
No, not really.
She's more focused on exposing the problems.
Yeah, she is. But sometimes just raising awareness of an issue is the first step towards change, right?
Right, you have to shine a light on the problem before you can fix it.
Exactly. It's like shining a light in a dark corner. It forces people to confront what's been hidden.
And once people are aware of the problem, they could start demanding solutions.
Exactly.
So what can individuals do to push back against these potentially dystopian trends?
Well, there's a lot they can do.
Like what?
They can educate themselves about the issues, support organizations that are fighting for privacy and digital rights,
Okay.
contact their elected officials, express their concerns.
Make their voices heard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can choose to opt out of certain technologies, limit their data footprint, and support businesses that prioritize privacy.
So it's about making conscious choices that align with our values.
Precisely. And most importantly, I think, they can stay engaged and informed. The future isn't set in stone.
No.
It's something we create through our choices and actions.
So this isn't just a conversation about conspiracy theories and government secrets.
No, it's not.
It's also a conversation about individual empowerment and taking responsibility for the future we want.
Exactly. We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix things.
We all have a role to play.
We do.
Well said. And speaking of shaping the world, one of the things that I found most chilling in this deep dive was the discussion about mind control and psychological manipulation.
Yeah, it's a fascinating but disturbing topic for sure. And as we've seen, the CIA has a long and controversial history in this area.
They do.
From MK Ultra to the more recent allegations of gaslighting former employees suffering from Havana Syndrome.
Right. It makes you wonder what else they've been up to.
It does.
Webb argues that these types of operations haven't stopped.
Yeah.
They've just become more sophisticated, more covert.
Right. Harder to detect.
And she even suggests that modern technologies, like social media algorithms and personalized advertising, are being used to manipulate our thoughts and behaviors.
That's a tough one to prove definitively.
It is, yeah.
But there's no question that we're living in an age of information overload and psychological manipulation.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the way social media platforms are designed to keep us scrolling and clicking. They're engineered to exploit our dopamine receptors and keep us hooked.
They are. It's all about engagement.
Yeah.
And those algorithms that personalize our news feeds, they can create these filter bubbles where we're only exposed to information that confirms our existing beliefs.
That's scary.
It is.
It can lead to more polarization and make it harder to have real conversations about important issues.
Yeah, it's like we're being subtly nudged in certain directions without even realizing it.
It's a little creepy, honestly.
It is, and it raises some important ethical questions about the power of technology and the responsibility of those who control it.
So how do we navigate this landscape and protect ourselves from being manipulated?
Well, it's not easy, but there are things we can do.
What are some of those things?
We can be more mindful of our media consumption, look for diverse sources of information, and question the narratives that are being presented to us.
Question everything.
Exactly.
Don't just take things at face value.
Right. We can also learn to recognize the tactics of manipulation, things like emotional appeals, fear-mongering, those ad hominem attacks.
Yeah, those are all classic manipulation techniques.
And most importantly, I think we can work on our critical thinking skills and develop a healthy skepticism
Okay.
towards any information that seems too good to be true or too convenient to ignore.
So it's about taking back control
It is.
of our attention, our thoughts, our actions.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming our agency in a world that's increasingly designed to manipulate and control us.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Mm.
We've been talking about some pretty mind-blowing stuff, about government agencies, hidden agendas, and the potential for manipulation in our world today.
It's been a deep dive, for sure. We've covered so much, from the origins of Al-Qaeda to the potential misuse of AI, the implications of a cashless society, and
throughout it all, we keep bumping up against this tension between individual freedom and the possibility of government overreach. It's a tricky balance and one we need to be really aware of.
Absolutely. Webb's work really pushes us to question the official story, to think critically about the information we're given. History's full of examples of governments abusing their power, and it would be naive to think it couldn't happen again.
So where do we go from here? If we accept that there's a real risk of government overreach, manipulation, what can we do to protect ourselves, to protect our freedoms?
That's the big question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. But I think awareness is the first step.
Okay.
We need to educate ourselves about what's going on, understand how power works, recognize those tactics of manipulation.
Knowledge is power, right?
Right. Exactly. And once we have that knowledge, we can actually do something about it. We can support organizations that are fighting for civil liberties, for privacy rights, for transparency in government. We can reach out to our elected officials, hold them accountable.
Make our voices heard.
Yes, exactly. And on a more personal level, we can be mindful of our own digital footprint, choose to opt out of certain technologies, support businesses that actually value our privacy. It's about making choices that reflect what we believe in.
I completely agree. And it's so important to talk to people who have different views, even if we disagree with them.
Yeah, that's tough sometimes.
It is, but it's through those honest conversations that we can actually bridge divides, find some common ground.
Well, Webb doesn't really offer a lot of concrete solutions in this interview, does she?
No, not really.
She's more focused on exposing the problem.
She is. But sometimes just bringing those problems to light, that's the first step towards change.
Right, you got to shine a light on the problem before you can fix it. Exactly. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. It makes people see what's been hidden there.
And once people see it, they can start demanding solutions.
Precisely.
So if you had to pick one key takeaway for our listeners from this deep dive, what would it be?
I'd say it's about empowerment. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, even helpless,
Yeah.
when you think about all these complex issues, but we're not powerless. We have agency. We can make a difference.
It starts with awareness, leads to action, and ultimately empowers us to shape the kind of future we want to live in.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive.
Oh,
It's been an amazing conversation.
it has.
And I hope it sparks some curiosity, some critical thinking in our listeners.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Of course.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep your minds open.
Mhm.
Until next time.